And welcome back. As we go ahead and continue working with file, let's go ahead and get ready to ask ourselves the question, how do we actually test to see if we've reached the end of a file? And this can be a very important distinction, especially if we have a lot of input we want to draw in. And of course, we know how to do this with the scanner class, but what about with the buffered reader class? Well, with the buffered reader class, if our program, for example, tries to read beyond the end of a file with either method, readLine or read, then the method in question is going to return a special value signal that the end of the file has been reached. If we're using readLine, it's going to return the value null. Thus, we can test for the end of a file by seeing if the readLine value we are reading in returns null. We can very easily test this, of course, with a Boolean expression such as while line does not equal null. What about the end of a file, but we want to use read? All right, well, read, of course, if you remember, is going to return an integer value. And because it's looking to return an integer value, if that integer value returns is -1, that is what we get if we try to go beyond what's in that file. It's because, if you remember, when we talked about this, that integer value corresponds to each ordinary kind of ASCII character that we're looking to kind of pull out of here. And those character values are always going to be positive. So when we get a negative value, this is a great way for us to test to say, hey, we've reached the end of a file. And of course, we can use something very similar. We can say like while value does not equal -1. And that's a quick way for us to test that if we're using read. All right, and so here I have a program set up with us to be able to look at these two different kind of methods in action. And so I have in here a read simulation right here, and I have also a read line simulation. So I'm just going to go ahead and, for now, let's focus on the read here. And let's just go ahead and comment out the read line. Just that way we don't have to kind of worry about this really being in here. So we're just going to go ahead and comment that out real quick. And let's go ahead and just see what happens. So if you notice, we're saying while input read is not equal to -1. And of course, our file is right here. So this is, of course, you see you have 6 lines here. So if we go ahead and run it, we have a statement here for each one of those kind of characters, if you will, or not characters, but word chunks in here. Because if you think about it, it's looking off these white space characters as kind of a real identifier here. And so that's why we're getting some of these. There are so many of these values listed in here. Again, this is not something that's going to be necessarily as much value if we want to actually use this in a traditional sense, but this is really handy if we are using that read method. Now, the one we're more likely to end up using is actually going to end up being over here with our read line. So let's go ahead and comment out now the read. And with the read method commented out, we can now focus on read line. I'm going to go ahead and run that one. And he goes, no, this one didn't output anything to the console here, right? Because it's outputting here to this numbered.txt file, because that's where we're saying, hey, use the output stream this time instead of the console. And so if I go over back to my program and refresh, you can see I now have a numbered.txt. And open up, you can see here it is. It's the exact same as the original, except now we have lines here to correspond for each line of the program. And again, the testing with this one was line does not equal null. So function-wise, they're doing a lot of the same thing here just to test to see if it reaches the end. However, remember the type of values that we're pulling in are, of course, going to be two different types. This one is coming back with an integer that is not necessarily an integer in our traditional sense, but is corresponding to our character set, whereas the read line here is going to pull in a line of text, and this is probably going to be more what we're used to when we start talking about, for example, traditional like inputs. We want to like convert it to an integer, or convert it to a double, etc.